From across time and space and throughout the multiverse, listen as two generations of comic book readers come together to discuss a single character or event that shaped pop culture as we know it. Let Your Geek Side Show presents Then and Now with Susan and Kitty. I'm Susan.
And I'm Kitty. You were surprisingly
what? Your spidey senses weren't up?
No.
Come on, we're doing. And today we're swinging across the Spider-Verse to talk about one of the ultimate additions to the Marvel Universe in recent years. From taking on the mantle of a falling hero to
fallen. Not falling.
He's
still falling.
He probably is still falling. I've been falling for 20 minutes. From taking on the mantle of a fallen hero to forging his own path, this web warrior is about to hit the big screen for the first time this December.
Woo!
Woo! This web slinger brings the Spider-Man name back to the teenage roots with a whole new perspective because it's Miles Morales then and now.
Woo! Woo! Oh my goodness. Okay. I got to start by saying Miles, but also Spider-Gwen, two characters who were so recently created, in the scope of comics, recently created. And they're going to be on the big screen in a week. I guess when this podcast goes up, it'll be the Monday of the week. So we haven't seen the film yet. We can't wait to see the film.
I know.
Hopefully.
Oh my God.
I'm so excited.
Heavy breathing. Heavy breathing. I'm so excited for this movie. This has been my most anticipated holiday season movie without a Star War.
Not a single Star War.
Not a single Star War. Here's $5. Go see a Star War.
But we're getting Spider-Man into the Spider-Verse.
Into the Spider-Verse. So not just Miles.
And because Miles is the Spider-Man who's going into the Spider-Verse.
Uh-huh.
I mean, there's a lot of them. But he's the title card billing.
But we're not just getting Miles. We're getting Gwen.
And
we're
Spider-Ham.
getting Spider-Ham. We're getting Spider-Man Noir.
We're getting Penny Parker and Spider.
Oh, my God.
And Peter Parker, of course.
Peter Parker. But we've always had Peter Parker.
Always had Peter
We've
Parker.
had lots of incarnations of Peter Parker on the big screen. So to see all these other representations of the Spider-Verse and the announcement that they will be doing sequels, including a female-based one, which has Silk, who, again, another comic book character who has been created in recent years. She's 2014.
Yeah.
And now is going to be part of this larger universe that has existed since, 1962?
Yeah, I just think it's so fabulous to see these newer creations they're just coming into their own, and they're going to be household names.
And I love that they're going to be household names because they matter.
Mm-hmm.
Having Spider-Man be the staple of with great power comes great responsibility, that character that you could always go to know what was right, even if it was hard. That was Peter Parker, right?
Yes.
So now we have all these different additions that are characters from all over, the Marvel universe, the 6'10", what's Gwen's? Gwen's is 10?
She's
10?
I know there's Earth 65.
She's
Earth 65.
Yeah, and then the 616, of course, and then Spider-Ham comes from a realm where, animals can talk.
Yeah.
So but they all have the same ideals, and they all matter in their world.
And I think Marvel's decision because especially to put it in the title of the film, but in recent years with Spider-Man stories, so many of the different universes were sort of disconnected. I mean, we had the 616 and the 1610, and those were very much kind of divided, except for comics that seemed out of continuity. But Marvel's decision to say, hey, there is a Spider-Verse, and these spider heroes are part of something. They're part of a larger web, if you will, and that they can all connect. It shows that everyone can be a spider hero, and because at the very core, like you said, it's that responsibility and doing the right thing when it's hard to do it. And now all these other heroes get to kind of see each other from those different perspectives and those different universes, and see what responsibility looks like in the 65 and in whatever the heck Spider-Ham comes from.
And even Noir, Noir is this totally weird version of the Spider-Man, where he's kind of a darker character, and it's everything that the other spider characters can't think because they are totally on the light side. He goes there in those darker moments to try to understand the villains in a lot of ways. He's it's very similar. He reminds me a lot of he and Moon Knight would either get along great or they would hate each other and like
Their costumes would look really nice next to one another.
I feel like that's a great like couples costume, like Moon Knight and
Spider-Man
Spider-Man
Noir.
Noir.
We better see some of this. If you do it, email us at podcasts@sideshow.
Seriously, email us podcast@sideshow. We'll put you up on Let Your Geek Sideshow.
But yeah, so like for me, and let's get back to Miles, but I think especially with this film coming out, the commitment to the Spider-Verse is Marvel's, and Sony is doing the film, but like in the Marvel mythos, that is the commitment to saying, yes, you also can be a Spider-Man. Anyone could be a Spider-Man as long as they step up and have that responsibility.
Yeah.
So where does Miles fit into all of that?
So where Miles fits in is, again, rather like such a new character when you like
2011, right?
2011 in August. like so late in the year.
Yeah.
And I can't even deal with, that's what, 7 years ago? Oh my God. Like Miles, I don't even think of Miles as being a new character. He's so ingrained in everything that's happened. And especially I know that later you're going to be talking about Secret Wars when they merged the universes.
They basically destroyed a whole universe, and the most important cargo to bring over from the Ultimate Universe was Spider-Man.
Yeah.
There were some other things that came over, but it really did, this is how we get Miles Morales into the main continuity. People can't just say that's just Ultimates anymore.
And that's amazing. He was created by Brian Michael Bendis and Sarah Pichelli. I'm sorry, I had to do that since apparently I pronounce her name incorrectly all the time. But he is Spider-Man in his universe, which is the Ultimate Universe. And he does have a lot of the same powers as Peter Parker, and I don't want to like get into all the different powers, but most notably he has a connection to Venom. Mm-hmm. And he has the Venom Strike and the Venom Blast, but he isn't possessed by the symbiote, which is like a very interesting kind of twist on a Spider-Man character.
Right. Because that is such an iconic face-off between a hero and a villain.
Oh, totally. And I just think of it as like some spiders are poisonous and some spiders aren't. Like, I know that's like a weird way to think of it, but
it's true.
Like, some spiders you don't want them to bite you, and then some.
I mean, generally, I don't want any spider to bite me unless I'm guaranteed to get Spider-Man powers. But,
yeah. So
and for those, I think we did mention just throwing back when you guys are done with this lovely podcast. We did do a Peter Parker episode, and we do bring up Miles, but this is
Miles's podcast.
Yeah.
Although it is very difficult to talk about Miles without bringing in other Spider-Verse characters.
Of course.
Yeah. I just would also like to note that Stan Lee approved of this character when he came out and thought he was a great addition to the Spider-Man universe. And having someone like Stan Lee put his stamp of approval on a character that was not created by him, but in reference to his one of the characters that's closest to his heart, Spider-Man, it does mean something to hear that Stan Lee approved of him.
Yeah.
So, Miles.
I feel like I want to make sure you get some talk in because I'm the now.
Yeah.
I'm the now.
You're the now.
My now comes at a very, very staunch moment for Marvel Comics where they made some like incredible decisions of like, here's where continuity kind of splits and then reassembles.
Right.
So I'm sure if you've listened to more of our podcasts on this, you'll note that Secret Wars, 2015's Secret Wars is one of those definitive events, and that's what kind of started the springboard for a lot of these characters now, even though they were still muddling around before then, but like that was one of those events that like kind of changed the trajectory for so many characters. So if you haven't checked it out, it's not impossible to read every miniseries, but it's definitely a place where you can go in and pick and choose and say, read the main, I think it's 9. They extended it to 9 issues. Secret Wars series itself. Miles is part of the ensemble cast of that. But there are mini-series, and you can pick up the threads of your favorite characters and see what happened to them in Battle World before they got back to those new series that started that fall. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, do you want me to?
I mean, you can kind of take off. I said my intro to them, and then for a lot of our, I mean, if you guys have been listening along, you know that we blur these lines of then and now, and especially with characters where they're very recent.
There's only 7 years, so I'm covering like the last 3 years. You've got the first 4 years.
And then what's hilarious about it is like, I picked up a lot of Miles stuff closer to now than I did to then, and then went backwards. So the stuff I'm a little bit more familiar with is like Edge of the Spider-Verse, because like I always a Spider-Man crossover is like, you know, my dream scenario. You know, Spider-Geddon's going on right now, and it's just so much fun. And is it still going? It's still going on. I was like, I'm. Like
they just introduced
behind.
one of my also new favorite Spider-Man, whose name is Spiders Man, which is just couple thousand spiders.
A pile of spiders.
A pile of spiders that think they are Peter Parker.
Yep, I know. I love that as well. And
look, anyone can be Spider-Man, even a pile of 10,000 spiders.
Right, but I can't look at him.
He's creepy.
He creeps
He's
me
very
out.
creepy.
Anyway, go ahead. Secret Wars.
Okay, so Secret Wars. So Miles was part of the main story. The kind of catalyst moment for that series is the collisions of the 616, which is, for better terminology, it's the main Marvel continuity, and then the 1610, which is the Ultimates universe, which, apart from the 616, is one of the biggest of the Marvel universes. And so there was I forget what it was called, but there was like a collision of those two universes, and so a small number of survivors hopped on a raft and were able to resist the reimagining of the Marvel universe that became Battleworld, controlled by God Emperor Doom, you know, because just the Doctor title wasn't enough. But so Miles did survive, and he does have some adventures in kind of trying to figure out how to pull the worlds back apart. But the big one for Secret Wars was Ultimate End, which, as you can guess, is the end of the Ultimate Universe. And it's all these characters coming to grips with that, trying to deal with Battleworld, and then dealing with the ramifications of once they pull Battleworld back apart and all the different zones go back into their existences. The 616 stays whole and kind of comes back, not quite as we knew it before, but pretty similar. But the Ultimates universe was no more, and so this event really was kind of the like life raft for Miles Morales and a couple artifacts and other characters to come into the 616 and stay there. And so this was a big deal because this was the first time that Miles was going to enter the main universe and then meet all those heroes that now existed in the main universe, like Miss Marvel, and he becomes part of the Champions later, and he brings that legacy of Spider-Man into this universe, and all the characters have to react to that.
Yeah.
And so I think that it's really cool. That was one of the biggest takeaways from Secret Wars is Miles Morales, welcome home, kind of. I mean, even though it wasn't his true home, but it was like, hey, we're glad to have you. Now let's have some fun in the main continuity with all these different heroes that you haven't encountered before.
Now, in this podcast, we're always looking for like through lines, like what makes Miles Morales Miles Morales. And I think that what you just touched on there is partially exactly that. You know, like him feeling out of place, but yet he's home. That's because his origin, like when you read the first couple arcs of him, and then everything pre-Cataclysm is mostly Miles trying to figure out.
Cataclysm, that was the word.
Yeah.
Thank you. I was like, collision, like crash course? No, Cataclysm.
No, Cataclysm. Everything pre-Cataclysm was Miles kind of like figuring out that he didn't come from the best background. Like it was a very big step away from Peter Parker. He had career criminals in his family, including like Prowler.
Yeah, his uncle, the Prowler.
Is the Prowler, who's like one of the biggest villains ever, you know? So having that and having to deal with that, he does what a lot of the Spider characters have to do, which is go backwards and say, who am I and where is my place in all this? So in a family that's he's African American as well as Latin American, and both of those cultures are very based in family. They're very based in you know, like who you are is who your family is, and
being part of the family unit.
Part of the family unit. So having to break away from that on both sides and become his own man is something that they really explored in the first arc of what was it? Ultimate. It was before it was just before it was Miles Morales Ultimate Spider-Man. Was it just Ultimate Spider-Man or Ultimate Comics? Anyway.
I don't remember exactly because I knew Ultimate End.
It was Ultimate something something. Ultimate something 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 something. But he was trying to figure out, like, as the spider DNA starts to mold with my own DNA, is like, what does that mean for the future of me and my family? Am I part of this family anymore? Because we are going to be different. Do I follow in my uncle and my father's footsteps and become a career criminal? Who am I and what do I do? So I find it interesting that once Secret Wars happens, he gets thrown into this whole other universe where he then again has to be like, who am I? Where do I fit into this? And what do I do?
And you touched on the phrase becoming his own man. And I think when you get over the hurdle of Secret Wars, I think we're coming close to the through line here, because that's the other half of it is he jumps into a universe that already has a Spider-Man.
Yeah.
And he's also going by Spider-Man. And so everyone says, okay, you're also a Spider-Man. And he does get a foothold in the superhero community. But then most of his journey from I'll briefly touch on Civil War II. But a lot of that journey moving up and becoming an all-new, all-different Avenger and then breaking off to form the Champions, it's the, okay, I'm Spider-Man, and that means something to people in this universe that it was slightly different in my universe. And do I be what they expect me to be because they're like, you're Spider-Man and that means you are this? Or am I going to be my own version of that?
Do I make up my own definition of Spider-Man?
Yeah.
And kind of like dig my own trench as to who he could be, or do I just accept that I have to fit into a mold of who Spider-Man already is?
I wrote in my notes here, through line question mark, being a legacy but not being defined by the choices of the actions of the predecessor. So that works both on the family side from the 1610 and the Spider-Man side on the 616.
There you
defining his own path and not being what people say he has to be.
So
I think that's where
perfect.
Yeah, and so I think one of the biggest new moments that Miles gets for that in the 616 is part of the all new, all different Avengers team, because that is a team almost completely comprised of legacy heroes. You have Miss Marvel, Kamala Khan, you've got Jane Foster, Thor, you've got Sam Wilson, Captain America, you've got Sam Alexander, Nova, and then they are being led by Vision and Tony Stark.
Right.
And then Miles Morales is the Spider-Man in that team. And he and the other younger members, Kamala and Sam Alexander, at some point they realize they don't agree with the adults.
Yeah.
They just don't feel that some of the choices the adults are making, because they are doing it for the greater good and we are Avengers and this is and these are the adults are people who also have orbited the regular Avengers for so much of their lives. I mean, Jane saw all of Thor's exploits and Sam was the Falcon. The younger heroes say, we don't agree with what you're doing. We're going to break and make our own team. And it was a big kind of a moment in the comics for people to go, wait, they're making another new superhero team that's not the Young Avengers. It's not Generation X. It's a new group of kids.
Totally.
And that cover, I think it was an Alex Ross cover, where it's the three of them burning their Avengers ID cards and saying, we're going to be champions. And so that was a big moment for people. And so the Champions team has, I think, been fantastic for Miles in terms of they're getting new teenage heroes and stuff, but he is one of the senior members of the team now. He is the Spider-Man of the team, but he ultimately made his own choice and said, I don't agree with what the Avengers are doing. I'm not just going to do it because that's the thing everybody wants to do in the Marvel universe. Everyone wants to be an Avenger. And it takes a lot of guts to step away from that kind of being put into that kind of title.
Absolutely.
And expectation of heroism. And so I think that was really cool.
It's the same type of decision that goes from like the expectation that you're going to do X because your father did X and your uncle did X and your mother's family expects you to do this. Like, it's the same type of courage that it takes to walk away from that and say, like, my life is taking me in a different direction than it took all of you, and that is okay. And that's something that we get to see a lot with Miles Morales specifically. We get to see him be the one to decide, like, I don't agree with that, and that's fine.
And he's still a kid in high school. He's got his high school buddies, and he's doing teenager things. I mean,
I like that they're always like, Miles brought Spider-Man back to high school because Peter Parker's like an adult now.
Yeah, Peter Parker runs Parker Industries.
I know, like, he has better things to do.
Yeah, and you do get to see Miles then affected by more modern teenage issues. I think the Champions, they really, really tactfully handled the issue of school shootings in that story. And so it's like, what does it take to be a teenage hero who can't stop something like that?
Right.
Because at the core of the Spider-Man story, there's always like down home, friendly neighborhood, personal ground level issues. And so bringing that back, having Miles bring that back to being a teenager is really cool. Especially for the modern moment. And the last thing I wanted to bring up about like the not being what people think you're going to be, that's the whole crux of Civil War II, which has mixed reception. It was written by Bendis, and so he did lay down some interesting foundations for his own character, because in an event where an inhuman named Ulysses is predicting elements of the future, there were these beautiful splash pages done by various artists of these moments that they said would come to pass in future issues. And one was Thor and Loki fighting kind of at the end of time. And it's like, what is that? And one was Miles Morales holding Captain America's battered and almost beaten dead body over a pile of rubble. And everyone was like, Miles, you're going to be a killer. And he was like, no, that's not me. That's not me. And so that actually came up in Secret Empire when Captain America was sided with Hydra. Miles had to come to that moment of, am I going to kill him or not? And ultimately, some of the adult heroes kind of say, like, you don't have to make that choice. You don't have to be the killer just because someone with precognitive abilities saw you doing that.
Yeah, like,
and so,
everything's always in motion.
Absolutely. And so it was really cool also to see the adult heroes step in and remind him, just because someone saw it in the future doesn't mean that's what you're going to be.
Yeah.
And so, like, Black Widow was the one who really stepped in and said, no, you don't have to do that.
Who would know better than anybody?
Yeah. And so that definitely is a really big part of Miles's character of the expectation of the name, living up to the name, living up to the legacy, or not living up and forging your own path.
Yeah, I think that Miles is going to be a legacy in his own right because of his own path that he forged himself, not because of anything that ever came before him.
Yeah, and he's gonna be the first Spider-Man for a lot of younger
I
fans.
think about that all the time.
Which is so cool.
I love that idea of Miles. I love the idea of Miles. I love the idea of them seeing Gwen.
Yeah.
Basically a ballerina rock star.
Yes.
And then Silk, who's like, scientist, like know-it-all, like,
there's
know.
There's a spider for every occasion. And I think, and we've brought it up, we did it in the Geek Culture Countdown as well with the top 10 legacy characters, just that idea that, yes, we've all grown up with these titans of pop culture, Iron Man, Captain America, Spider-Man. No one's replacing them.
Yeah.
But the newer versions bring new nuance to the characters, and new stories are always being told, even with the classic characters.
Totally.
But the fact that this version of this hero will be the first for some new fan is super cool.
You can always tell a Peter Parker story. Like, we all know how to tell a Peter Parker story.
Everyone has a Peter Parker story that I'm sure they want to tell.
Yeah, and then also everyone has that Peter Parker story that, like, touched them right in their heart, and they'll always remember that that's something that Peter Parker did for them.
And Miles Morales has that too.
And and the thing is that that's how we that's how we move forward. We get the Miles Morales, and then we look forward to getting to know him the way we know Peter Parker.
Yeah.
And there you go. So if fans are looking for recent adventures of Miles,
definitely check out Secret Wars if you want to see how he makes the leap. I just think it's called Miles Morales Ultimate Spider-Man. They changed the titles around a lot, but for team books and stuff, I definitely recommend the Champions, because he is one of those leaders of that team, and it is really cool to see the dynamic of this is the team he left the Avengers to start. And so that's something that I think, if you want to understand the character, especially in the most up-to-date modern context, and I say modern as if 2000 between 2011 and 2018.
Right. And if you want to read his initial storyline, it was called Ultimate Fallout.
Ultimate Fallout,
and then he moved on to Ultimate Comics Spider-Man. That is that's the then.
And then go check out the movie.
Go check out the movie. Everyone go see the movie.
Yeah, we haven't seen it yet, but you can be sure we will be seeing it. Probably seeing it multiple times.
We're seeing it so many times.
Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse.
Yeah.
It's going to be so good.
Anyway, from looking up to heroes to becoming one himself, Miles Morales has evolved into one of Marvel's brightest new stars. His experiences prove that anyone has what it takes to make a difference, and that others can't define your own personal path to heroism. Though he shares the name of Spider-Man with others, he stands as his own symbol of bravery, strength, and responsibility in every universe. Thank you so much for joining us today. That is Miles Morales, Then and Now. Do you enjoy listening to Then and Now? We are proud to bring you pop culture content completely ad-free, but that doesn't mean we don't need your support to help us keep going. Please take a moment to leave us a 5-star review on iTunes, Spotify, or your favorite podcasting platform and help spread the word about our podcast. We welcome fan feedback. Email us at podcast@sideshow.com with your thoughts and suggestions for how we can make our shows even better. Please tune in for our other pop culture podcasts. See if your fan favorites make the cut in the Geek Culture Countdown, a bi-weekly podcast featuring pop culture top 10 lists. Hear exclusive interviews with celebrities and pop culture industry leaders as they let their geek side show in Look Who Showed Up. Then get all the latest pop culture news with our daily briefing, a 2-minute breakdown of the biggest geek headlines perfect for your Alexa or Google News briefings. We wouldn't exist without your continued support. Thank you for listening, and don't forget to let your geek side show.